With the new DLC for Total War Warhammer 2 hopefully coming sometime before mid-year, maybe focused on Lizardmen and Skaven. That's kind of our big speculation right now here, right? And if it's not, I swear to God, I'll just fucking throw up on myself. But one of the lords I want to talk about is one of the probably the least likely, but also a pretty unique legendary possible lord for Total War Warhammer 2. And that's Throt the Unclean. And this is a master mutator of Clan Moulder. We've talked a lot about Iked Claw, we've talked about Thankful, and really those two, they hold probably the most weight as being possible legendary lords, but you know, I wouldn't have expected Queek Headtaker to have made the list. I'm sorry, Tretch Craventail. And Queek Headtaker still is not necessarily as iconic as really Thankful is. So it's interesting how Creative Assembly has approached their portrayal, or at least their choices for legendary lords. You know, we already have Lord Skrulk and we have Queek, and we now have Tretch Craventail, and that does leave Squeal Gnawtooth, which I don't really think so, Throt the Unclean, Iked Claw, Thankful, and Deathmaster's Snicketch. Unless we can get something that kind of says that assassins can now be part of some sort of legendary heroes list, I don't think we'll ever see Deathmaster's Snicketch in the game, because according to according to lore, he can't really be the leader of an army, or a faction for that matter, I guess you could say, when it comes to Total War Warhammer. Now, what we're going to do today is our typical kind of our rigmarole, right? We're going to talk about the lore blurb of Throt the Unclean. We're going to talk about his special rules and what his possible campaign mechanics and actual mechanics might be in Total War Warhammer. So let's jump on in here into Throt the Unclean. Throt the Unclean is one of the most twisted and ingenious master mutators of Clan Moulder, and has exploited the success to position himself as one of the 9 lords of Hellpit. The effects of a lifetime's work with Warpstone can be seen, as bone spines protrude out of Throt's back and a third arm sprouts out of his bloated but powerful frame. His left eye, torn from its socket in a struggle with a rival, has been replaced with a shard of Warpstone crudely hammered into place, feeding its baleful influence directly into Throt's brain. Over many self-developmental experiments, Throt has radically sped up his metabolism and now grows ravenously hungry after exertion. He requires constant nourishment and gluttonously crams tremendous amounts of food into his eternally unsatisfied gut. It is the Black Hunger, only worse. Eating more than 4 times his own body weight daily, Throt maintains such a pace to avoid being ravaged by his own warp-enhanced constitution. Surely, at the best of times, when deprived of food, meaning the instant he stops chewing, Throt becomes mindlessly ferocious. Throt's rise to power has been marked by an ability to create and lead to battle any number of bloodthirsty creatures, along with a knack for capturing new beasts on which to experiment. Whether it is obtaining blind worms, discovering applications for troll spleen, or cultivating the best growing juices to increase the size of rat ogres, few can match the deeds of Throt. Throt is active in advancing Clan Moulder's status, and is not unusual to find Throt accompanied by packs of war beasts, joining many Skaven battles. When Throt personally joins the fight, he wields Creature Killer, a modified things catcher of his own design that can grab and throttle even beasts the size of a rat ogre. Additionally, Throt carries a special whip made from minotaur hide and cured in troll digestive juices. Even the hunchbacked and mutated things that scuttle throughout the warrens of Hellpit fear its stinging pain. So, you know, you get a pretty detailed idea of the level of depravity in which is Throt the Unclean. He's not too unlike Grom the Paunch, which we talked about earlier, right? Who also has a pretty insatiable hunger. And with that, I think that Throt the Unclean brings a lot of really fun options to the table for a Clan Moulder actual, I don't want to say race, because they're already in the game, right? We've seen Clan Moulder and Hellpit itself added to the Mortal Empire's campaign map. Well, what if it actually had Throt the Unclean there, and there was mechanics around it that service not just simply Throt the Unclean, but Clan Moulder as a whole? And Clan Moulder is, it's hard to use the term tradespeople, or traders. That's a term I'm going to, like the Ferengi of the Warhammer world. That's not true either. But still, Clan Moulder, they kind of, just like Clan Scryer, they both trade heavily in what their clan specializes in. Clan Scryer with their many different technologies like warp fire throwers or warp lock jazales, rattling guns, stuff like that, which are the many constructs of Clan Scryer. Now Clan Moulder, on the other hand, has a different type of construct. Being of the more mutated bio type. When you look at rat ogres, when you look at hell pit abominations, you're looking at things that come directly from kind of the Clan Moulder spawning vats, more or less. And I think that would make a really fun thing here for Clan Moulder is maybe if their food mechanic, you know how you can use food, Terror in the Underdark or whatever it's called, the food in the actual battles to spawn clan rats. Well, what if you could use more food to spawn different items or different creatures? Like maybe it's, okay, it's 2 food or 3 food to spawn a rat ogre, or 7 food to spawn a hell pit abomination. So maybe your back's up against the wall and you're just going to go all in and use as many food as you can to defend yourself, because this is the last bastion of hope, and boom, you can pull out a hell pit abomination with your food mechanic from the actual combat portion of the Skaven campaigns. Or, you know, you really want to help break an army, and what would break that army more is more rat ogres. So you spend 3 or 5 or whatever to produce more rat ogres as part of that mechanic. Or maybe you just select the total amount of food you've got, and the buttons are there on the side, and you can click which ones you want in the middle of the battle. So maybe it just kind of comes to you as the battle unfolds. You're like, oh shit, I really need some rat ogres to absorb this cav charge. Boom, there's rat ogres on the field for you. Now, Throt the Unclean has a number of special rules I want to go into, and how they'll kind of play also into a Clan Moulder mechanic that I think would be a lot of fun here. So Master Controller is his first one here. He gets a lot of, I guess, bonuses. He's basically a Pack Master, and Pack Masters aren't in the game. There's no variation of any kind of Pack Master in any of the races. The Dark Elves have Beast Masters. The Goblins have something like that when it comes to Squigs, like the Squig Handlers. I think that Creative Assembly said, listen, this is going to be way too tedious to add into the game. Let's just kind of wash this. And you know what? I'm totally cool with that. I don't really think that we need to have beast handlers herding these feral beasts in the battlefield. It just kind of complicates things unnecessarily. It even complicated things in the tabletop, so I'm cool without it. But I think it would be cool if Master Controller was, rather than it being some sort of activatable ability or anything like that, it was some sort of passive benefit to giant rats and rat ogres, even in just campaign. You know, we take a look at stuff like the new Bloodlines and how the Blood Knights, or the Blood Dragons, I'm sorry, give bonuses to Dark Knights, or Black Knights and Blood Knights, as well as Graveguard. Something like that. Master Controller, I could see that being a bonus to rat ogres. Giant rats, which aren't in the game, but I would say if they went with a Clan Moulder or the new DLC, I could see giant rats being part of that DLC. You know, it's kind of like a Dire Wolves, Chaos Warhounds type of unit that is just kind of light, skirmish, interrupt backline, get up close and personal, and do some damage there, because that's one of the things I think that the Skaven lack, is a unit kind of like the giant rats. They're not really very fun and cool. Like, no, I don't think anyone looks at that Skaven roster and goes, fuck, you know what? This whole thing's missing giant rats. What the hell am I even going to play this race for? I think, though, that if they were in the roster, it's one of those kind of hidden gems that people would be like, man, I'm so glad they added these. And they'd fit really well into a Clan Moulder mechanic. Maybe even giant rats could be one of the summonables by expenditure of food. You know, like 2, rather than getting clan rats, you get giant rats instead. So that's something to kind of consider here. So again, Master Controller, I think, would confer some sort of bonuses to the campaign mechanics for rat ogres, giant rats, maybe hell pit abominations. You could wrap that into there. Anything could be kind of Clan Moulder-esque in the sense that maybe reduces their recruitment costs, their upkeep, maybe increases their leadership overall, because that's how this mechanic works. Master Controller allows those units to use Throt's leadership within 12 inches of him as a bubble. So maybe he infers an additional leadership when they're on the on the battlefield with him as well. Now he has another ability called Ravening Hunger, and this is kind of an interesting one. So the way it works in tabletop is anytime that Throt marches, which is it's a very specific mechanic. That doesn't just mean moving. When you march or you do a round of combat after break tests, you have to do a leadership test. And if you fail it, then you have to pass a leadership test or consume a single model. So you have the choice here. But here's what I think would be cool. Maybe Ravening Hunger is an ability that you can use that regenerates Throt. Now, Throt himself, Throt the Unclean, has regeneration as a special rule of his, and he also causes fear because he's a huge rat. He's like rat ogre sized large. He's supposed to be pretty monstrous. He's got 3 arms. He's a pretty terrifying sight. I mean, all of Clan Moulder in and of itself is pretty fucking hellish. Well, no pun intended because I live in Hell Pit, but still. I think Ravening Hunger would be pretty nifty if it was a mechanic wherein you either had a chance to go, not berserk, but rampage, more or less. And you had to use Ravening Hunger to bring him back under control. Like maybe Ravening Hunger, he's killing and eating everything that's around him. And that's Skaven, that's individual enemy units, whatever it is. But you can use Ravening Hunger to bring him out of that rampage and back under your control. Or you can use it, I mean, like I'm saying that, or as in like it's either this or the other. I'm saying that in addition to, you can use it also to target one of your units and heal yourself. And maybe there's some sort of gauge on the battlefield that shows for Clan Moulder. Like, you know what we see with the Dark Elves, how as that gauge fills up, boom, Mars Prowess triggers and they're off to the races. Maybe Ravening Hunger is the more he's in combat, the more damage he does, that meter builds, and as soon as it hits the end of it, he goes into a feeding frenzy. So yeah, sure, he might be doing more damage, but he does more damage to everything around him. And you have to use Ravening Hunger to bring that gauge back down. And at the same time, maybe heal him a little bit. So it forces you to play Skaven a little bit more aggressive, and it kind of forces you to play with a little bit more chaff that you can actually use, not just for the enemy, but for yourself to eat, which I think is kind of cool. It makes it so that you're not just simply a ravaging Skaven horde, which is kind of the reason you play Skaven, but at the same time, it makes a little bit more of a fun mechanic that makes you kind of micro internally the way your actual lord is played. Now he has 2 magic items, Creature Killer and Whip of Domination. There's no real cool, I guess, lore blurb on this. So Throt fights with both a blade and a Creature Killer. That's it. And Creature Killer here is this, basically this, you'll see it here in the picture here, but it's like think of a staff. At the end of that staff is it the Sigma sign or whatever? It's like basically a U with 2 big long branches that stick in towards the center of it. So you see this in Vermintide, right? You use that thing, the Things Catcher as they call it, when they put it around your neck and they pull you away. It's the same principle for this. The Creature Killer is meant to kind of subdue targets, so larger targets, kind of like rat ogres. And what I think that this would kind of confer or infer for Throt here is that he would have AP, he would have anti-large, and maybe a kind of mechanic where he can snare large creatures, anything with monstrous large, or just anything above small infantry. So you could even say a cavalry unit. He can use this to kind of lock them down, keep them in his radius as he beats the shit out of them. So maybe we're looking at Throt the Unclean as this kind of ultimate destroyer of large monsters. And we see that a lot, right? There's a lot of large creatures, especially in Total War Warhammer 2. You look at the Lizardmen, the Dark Elves, and the High Elves, which is, you know, the 4 core races, including the Skaven, of Total War Warhammer 2. All their lords can have pretty terrible creatures. Black dragons, star, moon, sun dragons, carnosaurs, even giant stegodons. I mean, you've got so many different things that Creature Killer can be applied to in Total War Warhammer 2 alone. You expand that out to Tomb Kings, you expand that out to the Vampire Coast. There's plenty of large creatures that Creature Killer could help subdue, and I think that'd be a really cool option here for the Skaven to have a lord that is a little bit larger. He himself would have more mass because he would be a little bit more of a monstrous lord. He wouldn't be monstrous as in he'd be a massive Hell Pit abomination, but he'd be more rat ogre sized. And that's one thing that's pretty huge with any lord on foot. He has to have a mass, or else he just gets punted across the battlefield left and right. Now, the last item here is Whip of Domination, the lore. So this thing here is kind of tricky. The way it works is that it infers, I keep saying confers and infers interchangeably. The way it works is it applies a -2 penalty to leadership for the remainder of the player's turn in tabletop. So maybe this could just simply be a massive leadership penalty to units that whenever he uses it, he can just cracks it wildly. And it helps increase the leadership of things around him because they're afraid of him. They're like, oh shit, we better do what he wants, or that thing's gonna be around my neck. And everyone else around him that's an enemy, it causes a massive leadership penalty for them. Or maybe it's something where he could use it on a specific target, and it I almost said incurs again. It applies a penalty to maybe their armor, something like that, as you kind of wrangle some into control with his creature killer and whatnot. So I think that Throt the Unclean, while a wild card and not the most likely option for our next DLC, I think he'd be a lot of fun, because I think that what makes Clan Moulder so different and unique is their ability to kind of trade and be a part of a huge part actually, of the Skaven society. So maybe as part of the overall campaign mechanics of a Clan Moulder as far as a race go, they have maybe additional benefits when it comes to trading with other Skaven clans. Maybe they get more out of it, or maybe it's easier for them to establish trade with these clans, or maybe they have sight of all the Skaven clans on the map. Not like actual, like, their things are revealed, but they have the diplomatic relations to them immediately, so they can do trade pretty quickly. Something that kind of nods to the fact that almost every single Skaven army, even the ones that we use right now in Total War Warhammer 2, borrows something from Clan Moulder. They borrow something from Clan Scryer. And I think that that would be a really interesting mechanic, is to give a good nod to that, as really the huge linchpins of the Skaven army and the Skaven society, as well as like the Skaven economy. So they're pretty large in that whole entire front. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video here today. I've been wanting to do this one for a long time. I'm going to kind of couple this with a video that we will be doing very shortly here on how to fix the Skaven. And that will cover possible legendary lords for the DLC, possible unit choices, as well as some kind of mechanic changes that we need to see made to both the Skaven and the Lizardmen, because I'll be doing a separate video for the Lizardmen, and some of the things that kind of bring them up to the snuff of where Total War Warhammer 2 is with the rest of the races, right? I mean, the Tomb Kings are incredible. I love the way that their campaign mechanics work. The Vampire Coast, holy crap, man. Like, that's probably one of the best and most streamlined campaigns I've ever played in the Total War franchise, hands down. Now, when we look at stuff like the Dark Elves and the High Elves, their campaign mechanics, I think, are pretty awesome and fluid, especially when we look at Alarielle and Marathi, which have gotten a pretty nice buff in their respective DLC. Now, hopefully this will kind of bring these guys up to that same bar, Skaven and Lizardmen, and kind of keep them even across the board. But if you have any questions or comments, or, you know, maybe you want to have a better idea of, or maybe you have a better idea of how Clan Moulder should behave in the Total War Warhammer 2 Mortal Empires or Warhammer 2 map, Vortex campaign map, go ahead, let me know, comment below, have at it. Let's just see what you guys come up with. Stoked to hear what you guys always have to say. But thanks so much for watching here today, guys. Have a good one, and take care.